When it comes to state budgets, the cost to run prisons grabs the biggest slice of that pie. In fact, it is the fastest growing line item after Medicaid. Here in New York State, for example, the total taxpayer cost for prisons is an annual $3.5 billion. On a national scale, U.S. prisons have a population of 2.4 million inmates and costs us $80 billion a year to run. Joining us now to talk about the rising cost of incarceration is Richard Greenwald. He is the executive director and assistant to Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter for youth violence. Richard, thank you for coming up from Philadelphia to be here on Arise Xchange. This is a conversation that has certainly been making news when you have presidential candidates like Rand Paul talking about the issue of prisons. $80 billion. States spend twice as much on this as other services.
That's right. That's right. It's 1 in 15 general fund dollars goes towards corrections. And that's an enormous price to pay, not only fiscally, but also morally as well. We just can't have the human cost of those who are affected by corrections that continue to rise. Is
there a price tag that we could put on as well as when people get out of prison and they're ill prepared for the job market and what that is costing?
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota did a study on this, the absence of people in the labor market, and they figured that there was a $32 billion lack of income just for Minnesota alone. So that's a tremendous loss of workforce, but also a loss of tax dollars coming into local coffers.
Did we get here because of the drug war?
We partly got here because we're tough on crime, and we locked a lot of people up in the last 30 years, and the incarceration rates are tremendous. In the United States, we lock up more people than the top 35 European countries together. So the war on drugs, we're part of it, but it's not just war on drugs. It's not just, it's also violence and other crime as well.
So when you look at this problem, is it that the prisons are not being run efficiently enough? I mean, we could say we're putting too many people in prison, but is there simply too much government waste in the prisons? And for example, do the private prisons, which have come under some scrutiny, do a better job or a worse job?
It's not efficiencies, it's necessarily. You know, prisons, you can't, if you reduce your number of population in a prison and close a wing, it doesn't mean you get to close the whole corrections system down. You have workers you have to pay for, you have heating and those kinds of bills. So it's not necessarily efficiency. It's more about what do we do with people when they get out. 95% of everybody who leaves a prison, enters the prison is going to leave, and 65% of them will return. So it's more about,
so the rate of return is 65%. So we're not teaching prisoners to have new jobs. We're not giving them skills. We're not preparing them to come back into the...
Right. We're mainly about keeping them safe and secure when they're behind the walls, and there's a huge disconnect when people leave prison and move into a community.
Are there any states out there that are doing a better job at this?
Yeah, there's lots of good programs here and there. New Jersey's doing good work. Some of Pennsylvania's doing good work. Texas is doing work. Kansas is doing good work. And what they're doing is they're investing in community corrections. They're investing in community. They're helping people transition from being behind bars into the labor market by gradually moving people into programs that lead to jobs.
You know, what we can't do is we can't just open the doors and let everybody out. California had a huge overcrowding problem, and the courts mandated some people be released. On the federal level, does the federal system cost as much? Are they doing anything different?
Well, most of the people in the United States are in state prisons, and it's 2.5 million people. If you factor in jails, it's 10 million. So really, you want to start there.
Jails typically house people for crimes for less than a year, correct?
Yeah, and it's also holding them for trial and those types of things.
What are you doing in Pennsylvania?
Well, I work for Mayor Nutter, and I'm also a Stoneleigh Foundation fellow. I work on juvenile justice system. In particular, I work on preventing youth violence. Very important in today's topic because 60% of all youth in this country witness violence at some point. That leads to anxiety, depression, falling behind, and can lead to cycles of violence. Whatever we can do on the prevention side and intervention side to reduce those involved with crime will certainly reduce the number of people in prison. Whatever we can do to help police and parole to focus on less on the arrest side and more on the prevention side, make all the difference in the world.
Okay. Richard Greenwald, Executive Director and Assistant to Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, thank you for coming up from Philadelphia. We'll have you back on to talk more about this. It's fascinating.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Next Tuesday on Arise Xchange as well, we will continue our series, Dollars Behind the Bars, how private prisons have become big business. Ahead, why one restaurant is making its food look better, but maybe not taste better. You're watching Arise Xchange. Stay with us.